everybody. Welcome to the National Museum of Industrial History. I'm Andrea Zaya. I'm the Interim Executive Director and the Curator here at the museum. And it is really wonderful to see all of you here today as we've been celebrating Anthracite Heritage for the last several weeks. There have been a number of events and activities across the region, and we are extremely grateful and proud to have the work of Andrea Krupp here with us at the National Museum of Industrial History. Andrea is a visual artist, independent researcher, and curator. She graduated from the University of Arts in Philadelphia, and she holds a BFA with honors in printmaking. For the last decade, she has created artwork that engages thoughtfully with nature and the climate crisis. Her current interdisciplinary project, Seeing Coal, combines archival research with coal-based materials and pigments to explore and comment on Pennsylvania's rich coal history. We are pleased to feature Dark Matter, the Art of Anthracite Coal, on display here through February 4th. The show has inspired us to see anthracite coal differently, and this has actually likely been the artist's aim all along. She uses artistic expression to explore the cultural and environmental significance of anthracite coal, and typically used as a fuel source, it's very easy for us to disconnect from the resources that make our daily lives possible. Andrea creates a visual, tangible experience from the very material that is so frequently hidden from view. So please join me in welcoming Andrea Krupp.
Thank you everyone for being here on this dreary day in such a beautiful museum. So I'm really pleased to be here. So there's my intro slide. I'm going to try not to read too much, but the idea is, first of all, let me thank the museum, and I don't know if Emily Marchiano is here. She helped design the graphics and the flyers for my exhibit, and Mike Piersa has just been a fantastic champion and enthusiastic supporter of my project. And I also want to mention the special lighting inside the cases where my artwork is displayed was cleverly organized by Joe Nemeth and Cliff Both, who put lights inside the cases so that you could see the artwork, which is of course a black stone and hard to see. So I appreciate all the care that went into making this exhibit possible. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Everything sounds good? I'm so happy that it's a stone that brings us together today, and probably our common curiosity about it or common love of this material. And certainly I've kind of fallen in love with anthracite. So for the next half hour, I don't know why the screen is going blank. Do I have to do something? Maybe my thing just went idle. Did it come back?
It did, for a minute.
Are we there yet? Don't know what's happening. I think maybe it just went idle. Well, anyway, when we get rolling, I'll talk for about half an hour. I've got about 20 slides to go through, and I could talk for hours and hours. So I'm gonna go between reading from my notes and trying to wing it. I have a lot of enthusiasm to share, and I hope I can keep y'all interested. Let me know if the screen goes blank, because I can't see behind me. But this image I want to start with is a historical image from the Library Company of Philadelphia, where I used to work as a rare book conservator. And that exposure to historical materials really influenced my visual art in a lot of ways, but this was actually the first time I ever saw anthracite coal, and you know, it's in the form of a graphic and not even the actual stone. So it drew me in, the graphic design of this. I just love how this is an image that represents, it's an image from 1876 that represents the Girard Estate coal lands up in the anthracite fields not too far from here. But I love this underground, imagined dreamscape. You know, we can't see underground, but this image was composed based on data and sampling and core samples made by surveyors and geologists to create this imaginative panorama. And since I studied printmaking in school, I'm kind of used to looking closely at printed images and kind of reading them and deciphering them. But even if you don't fully understand what's happening in this image, it's still an attractive, abstract composition. And that's how I appreciate most of these designs. First, for their beauty, for their aesthetics, and then the curiosity becomes sparked when you start noticing little details like what are those tiny little white forms that are scratched out of the coal vein. So I don't know how many of you understand what we're seeing, but it represents how the layers of coal lie underground in these wave forms. So that was pretty curious, and it began my investigation of this material. I thought the image was very beautiful and curious. I learned more about it. And the other thing I learned was that our collections at the Library Company of Philadelphia contained a treasure trove of imagery and text relating to coal in books, prints, maps, photographs that were produced during the time when coal was much more visible in culture, in the city, and in the landscape. So that would be, 18th, 19th, and 20th century materials are what I was looking through mine inspectors' reports to gather together images for, where am I? Yeah, for this exhibit, which happened at the Library Company of Philadelphia in 2021 and was really the beginning of the Seeing Coal project. So in parallel with historical research, I began investigating the stone itself, and I'll show slides about those various different influences that I've been focused on over the last several years as the project continues to grow. But the exhibit's over, it lives online, and there's the address there to type in if you want to page through on your own time all of the items that were on display at the Library Company, plus many others. A lot of the images on display in the library were attached to books and took up a lot of space to display, whereas online I was just able to scan entire series of images that I couldn't display in real life. But this exhibition, I hope, will also point you back to the historical collections and back to the original materials. The Library Company and many other historical repositories, free and open to the public, and it's just always so interesting to engage with the object that's traveled through time to give us this information and give us this inspiration. That's how it's worked for me. This image is it's one of a fantastic series by Franklin Platt, and it was issued as part of a mine inspector's report. But he has a series of 20 or so lithographs like this that begin to try to describe the spatial complexities of the underground coal mine. And I contorted my brain to try to really grasp what that environment would be like inside the coal vein. These images, if you can attempt to read them, they give you an abstract notion of that space. But it's nothing to the kind of knowledge that the coal miners had, going underground and inhabiting these spaces. Did I skip the coal mine yet? No, okay. Before we get into the coal mine then, these slides were another highlight from the exhibition. These are images from the second geological survey of Pennsylvania that was made in 1884. And this is considered a masterpiece of surveying, geology, and printing arts. It's composed of, these are two examples from a portfolio of about 50 highly detailed maps and tons and tons of information about the anthracite region in Pennsylvania. So there were several sheets in the exhibit, and I wanted to call attention to the graph on the right there, because I would just want to talk a little bit more in depth about that and why it's one of my favorite pieces from the show. Oh, I had something in my pocket that I don't have anymore. Let me see if I can do without it. But okay, so let me talk about this map. This became an object of fascination. It shows the volume of anthracite coal mined in Pennsylvania between 1820 and 1870, so 50 years. And it's not like your usual XY graph. It has a strange form. And I was wondering why that graph looked that way. And without my little prop, I don't know if I can properly show you, but an XY graph is two lines, right? Typically, the vertical one is showing amount, and maybe the one on the bottom is showing time, going from the now to the future or whatever time you're measuring. In this case, the designer of this sheet took the XY graph.
You want a laser pointer?
Yeah, no, it's okay.
Are you sure?
Yeah,
okay.
It's going to be too wiggly. I have that piece of paper to show you. But anyway, what they did was they took the XY graph, and effectively, if you fold that in half and turn it on its side, you'll see the regular graph. But so the artist, the designer, decided to present the data in this way. After the talk, I'm going to find my little prop and show you if you have any further questions. But let me show you what I did with it. So that was my understanding of how it worked. I was just fascinated by it. It's an unusual graph. So what I did was I had a question, well, what would that look like now if the data was extended to cover 200 years of anthracite mining instead of just 50, 200. So continuing to read down in time, well, first of all, just because I'm a graphic artist and a visual artist, I was extremely pleased with the form. I think it's a beautiful, balanced form, but it also represents a kind of precarity, as opposed to the other form, which was quite stable. A mountain of material sitting on the ground, almost indicating exponential growth that goes on forever. My graph shows the exponential growth, for sure. The little map would be like the equivalent of the top third, the little graph. The exponential growth is happening. The widest point of the graph is 1917. And then soon after that, the volumes of coal that were mined in Pennsylvania become smaller and smaller until we get to the year 2020 at the bottom. So it was a really fun project. Please.
Is the reason why some did that done in 2020 due to COVID?
I took the cutoff of 2020 just because I think that's where the data ended that I had access to online.
What percent of anthracite is carbon?
Lot. It's almost pure, which is one of the reasons why I love it so much. It's like up to 90+ % carbon. So I'm going to talk a lot more about carbon and my interest in it, and also it's why the stone looks the way it is. It's carbon. It's just beautiful. So I'm not going to read the poem to you, but you can read the poem. And I will be glad to cycle back to any of these slides. And if you have any questions popping up as I go, please just check in. I'm going to try to keep it brief so we have more time for questions and answers at the end. But please, I don't mind. Okay, so here's the coal mine, right? So this is as close as I would ever get to understanding the experience of being inside a coal mine. Of course, when I was there, it was very quiet-ish, but I wondered what the noise and the sounds would have been like when it was an active working space. And this kind of knowledge is, with the deep coal miners, fading away, disappearing. And I think that's something that gives me pause, and it's something that I think a lot about. And certainly when I was inside the mine as a tourist, I was wondering about the coal miners' experience and the things that they heard and the things that they felt, and how those years of hard labor and facing dangers, how that affected their, life above ground. But they had this very special relationship in a romantic sense, not romantic, but just this, for me, it seems like such a unique perspective on the earth, right? To be in an unhuman space. I thought it was very moving. In fact, I was very emotionally affected being underground. So some of my artworks at this period, these were included in the exhibition at the Library Company. These artworks, many of them were made in direct response to the graphic materials that I was studying, like the core samples and the transverse sections. So I began to adopt that visual language into my own artwork. The text is a little small, but on the left is titled Mammoth Vein. In the center is titled Of Immensity and Depth. And the poem on the left reads, Go slow, slower, slowly lower, an extra-human arc through biolithic time. And alongside of that vertical design is quoted from the sheet that I stole it from. It says, the distance is probably confused. So it was a note on the sheet in the Grand Atlas from the surveyor admitting to the amount of uncertainty that was going into creating these images of something that is essentially unseen. I love this concept very much, and I was so pleased to spot that little note, the surveyor's note, this very human admission in the artwork, so I copied that. My more current angles of my research involve thinking about coal moving above ground, and thinking about its presence in our lives above ground. And well, for us in the city, it means one thing. For people who live up here, it might mean another. But what we're seeing here is an aerial view of Philadelphia on the Delaware River in 1925. And I don't know how easy it is to perceive, but you can read the blackness of that coal port. It was a major movement of coal happened from the Lehigh Valley into the Philadelphia and to the various rivers for continued export or just their landing there in the city. But the soot, the coal dust, the fine grits and powders, these left traces on the landscape over those hundreds of years when coal was transported. And I thought that was just fascinating that you could see not only the rail lines, but the blackness surrounding those lines.
I hope at least they didn't have air quality eaters because I hate air quality eaters. Do you hate air quality eaters?
I don't hate them. I'm glad that I'm not living in Philadelphia in 1925. Alerts or no alerts, the air was dirty. So yeah, the alerts, I think they're useful. And I think this really is a poignant reminder of how bad things were not too long ago and how much better it is along the Delaware River in the city right now. It's much more pleasurable to be there than it must have been back then. But again, it's just not that long ago. So yeah, environmental regulations, all for them. These are works that I created in response to absorbing all of that blackness from those aerial views. I was quite moved by those images. And since I'm curious about all kinds of carbon and carbon materials, these artworks included anthracite grit and powder, but I also purchased a small supply of 3,000 tow carbon fiber. These are nanofibers. Carbon tow fibers, that just means unprocessed strings. I brought some here to show you. So it looks like a little 2mm cord, a black thread, but it's actually composed of 3,000 strands. And you can't perceive that in the cord, but when you float it in water, the 3,000 strands are able to move and separate. And so I spent a lot of time watching carbon fibers move in water and, you know, making messes with grits and stuff. And I thought, to capture the movement of the carbon fiber in the water, I need to create a solution. And I was just experimenting. These are very experimental pieces, but I was able to capture that movement by dissolving some adhesive in the water, and then adding grits and powders and carbon fiber, and then letting the water evaporate. And what was left were those materials trapped in a transparent film, and that film I was able to use in my collages like that. So that was a little, you know, a little excursion into carbon fiber. It makes me really want to look at it really close up. Can you read that? I'm going to read the text there. It says, mammoth vein carbon, anthracite fossil bog, carbon flows in iron rail veins through the porous border between city and river, lung and atmosphere, body and bog. And this is the final little series of works on paper that I created over the last several years, and this one is referencing the bootleg coal structures. And I know that Mitch Troutman recently gave a talk on his new research on bootleg coal in Pennsylvania. I don't know if anyone went to see that, but he has a new book out. So we had a little conversation. He was not aware of the German photographers, Berndt and Hille Becker, who documented these forms in the 1970s. They were German, and their life's work was to document the forms in the landscape of heavy industry in Europe and America. So they documented Bethlehem steel, but at the same time, someone tipped them off to the existence of these structures, and at that time they were able to document 100 of them. And the book is here. I brought 2 of their books. I was astounded by their work overall, and then their focus on the coal tipples was just so lucky. And really, I don't know how many of them exist anymore. Mitch Troutman is probably the guy to talk to about that. But anyway, I was thinking, how will we remember coal mining and the sacrifice made by miners and their families when the industrial remains are erased from the visual landscape? So really all we have is photographs and documents and artists and people who are continuing to remember this past.
The way to preserve it is, Scranton preserves it, is still a coal mining town. Scranton still mines coal, and now it's not used for electricity, it's used for construction.
Interesting. I like that. That sounds good. I like the fact that we're thinking of other ways to use anthracite besides burning it. I think it's also being studied as a technological material and a source of graphene and all kinds of really high-tech stuff that carbon can do, carbon is just so incredible. So the work of Berndt and Hille Becker were pretty influential, I'd say, on me. And I don't know if you can read those poems, but I'm going to skip ahead. But I can circle back to them if anyone wants to read them or see them up close. Right, okay, so now we're on to the materials. So I've done historical research. I was creating graphic works on paper using the language of, the graphic arts. And now I'm sort of working with anthracite, smashing it up or whatever, just looking at it sort of brought me to the idea of carving it, and that's where I am now in this project. So, but my first interactions with actual lumps of anthracite, not photographs of it, was in 2020 when some friends in Philadelphia had done an installation project where they had a ton of Pennsylvania anthracite coal, and they had a ton of it, and they gave me a couple buckets to play with. I'm not quite sure where they got it from, but they did say it was from somewhere in Pennsylvania. So I spent COVID lockdown, this is what I did. I was smashing coal on my deck using a cinder block as an anvil and whatever hand tools I had. I have a lot of sharp tools because I used to do wood carving and etching and stuff, so I just sort of used my tools and I was just so fascinated by the way it looked and how bright it was, and at the same time so black, just so beautiful. Like, it's a jewel. It's just so endlessly fascinating, and it's fascinating at every scale. You probably, maybe people are familiar with that flyer at the bottom that shows the different sizes of coal that it was processed into for various uses. And I was really attracted by the language and the words, the very specific vocabulary that's attached to coal and coal mining. And preserving language is another way of preserving memory. Words serve as monuments, in a sense, and a means of recalling something that is otherwise lost or missing. So the next step after smashing things up was I was remembering seeing anthracite carvings at the Anthracite Heritage Museum and at the No. 9 coal mine and museum, and I was pretty struck by those objects. So that
I visited both I went to that No. 9 coal mine in 2014 and on December 16th, 2023, I got to go to the Anthracite Heritage Museum.
it's pretty awesome. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
I found where anthracite comes from. It means coal-like. They didn't name it a direct coal. People didn't name it a direct coal related name. And then they actually decided to the property because it was using jewelry.
Okay.
Because it has some gemmy property because it's using jewelry is how it got its name.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, talking about language. That's a very good point. How did anthracite get its name? Well, there it is. My first task that I wanted to do was see if I could bring a lump of anthracite up to a mirror finish. And again, experimenting. What I ended up doing was just getting a series of flat trays, and in each one I would put some water and a different grade of sandpaper, a nice sheet of sandpaper, but these are small lumps of coal this big. So I could easily do this little action on a full sheet of sandpaper in water to keep down the dust, because the stuff is ridiculously dirty. Blackening, it's not dirt, it's blackness. And then just going through that process of grinding in water, step by step, I was able to achieve a mirror finish, and here it is reflecting the Philadelphia skyline. And I made many of these black mirrors, and I've used them in installations and in some other sculptures. Right, oh, how do I make that play?
That's related to how it got its name.
Yeah, this is a little video, and I wish I could make it play. I can't quite see. Anyway, it shimmers. It's beautiful. The mirror of the anthracite is capturing the movement of water and light glistening off the water. And this is in the Arctic Circle, actually. So I brought anthracite coal with me on a trip up into this ice to specifically let the coal travel around and see more of the world. And I would like to say that art and imagination transform coal from a commercial energy commodity into a poetic object.
Where in the Arctic is it?
That's right up in Svalbard, where they're actually just finished their last coal mining in 2023. So a coal mining area. I went specifically because of that, and I brought coal with me to meet anthracite, Arctic anthracite, which is not, they called it anthracite, but it's dirty, nasty stuff. It's not. It's really not. Did I skip? Oh, it did? Oh, how weird. Oh, there it is. It's very brief.
That's water on it.
That's water, and someone walking by. Cool, okay, because I have another video, so maybe it'll work. Oh yeah, this is a video too. This is swirling particles on water. Let me see if I touch this button, if it'll move. Oh yeah, there it goes. Okay, This is what the trays of water look like when I'm polishing the anthracite. And I was immediately captivated. What is this stuff? Why is it so silver? It's just this brilliant reflection. The stuff does not sink. So when I'm grinding it, some of the particles sink and they're black and they're on the bottom. But there's other particles, probably of just the right size, that stay on the surface of the water and look absolutely brilliant silver. And then when you touch a piece of paper, it lifts right off, and then you have black carbon powder on the paper, which will blow away pretty much, unless you spray it and fix it. So I thought that was a fun experiment, and another one of the reasons why I just keep exploring. I have a lot of questions about what this is and why it looks this way. So if there are any material scientists in the room, please reach out. I'm very interested in getting a closer look at those particles and really try to understand what gives anthracite these specific aesthetic qualities that are so engaging. Right, talking about molecules and atoms. In my exhibition at the Library Company, I had a section on geology, and I mentioned the father of geology, James Hutton, who in the 1700s was able to read the visual clues in the landscape and was the first to intuit the vastness of Earth's age and the concept of deep geologic time. And so that's what I'm referencing in this poem that reads, "Don't stop there. Keep going deeper. We know from Hutton, the rest of our inquiry, that we find no vestige of a beginning and no prospect of an end." To me, anthracite coal perfectly embodies Hutton's concept of nature's vastness. Earth's material history stretches forwards and backwards in unimaginable swaths of time. We humans intersect with these ancient processes for only a brief second. And it's nothing short of miraculous that we're here, witness to the superabundance of life on Earth in the year 2024. It truly is miraculous. And I feel that paying attention to anthracite coal, which is a 300 million year old material, feels like a good lens through which to observe and think about our relationship to nature and our responsibility to nature's ecosystems and materials that make life possible. And not only that, but to adopt a humble stance in the face of nature and in the face of all the things that we don't know. That's just a really big theme in my work. Humility. So we're getting close to the end of the last slide almost. So I began doing these carvings just this past summer. At first, I didn't know how to approach. I'm not a carver, I'm not a sculptor. Again, 3D language is a totally new language for me to work in, but I'm feeling my way slowly. And I began by doing I saw these black mirrors that I had made, and I'm like, okay, go beyond the mirror. And then I started sort of trying to crack into that polished surface using sharp tools and scratching. And I didn't have any real stone carving tools, so I was really kind of playing around and trying to not be afraid and just going for it. And I ended up with these little forms on the left that somehow they borrow some of the visual clues of coal mining with a little scratched coal cart or some rail lines, but I think more than that, and the little wooden props, I felt that those little lumps of darkness kind of embodied the darkness inside the coal mine. But eventually now I really wanted to manipulate the stone even more and try to gain a little more control over my tools. I bought a few more different kinds of tools. And I'm ending up working with these very basic forms. I'm thinking about the forms of coal above ground in comb piles, and in coal stockpiles at rail ports, And I'm like studying those on Google Earth, so you can zoom around to all the great major coal depots in the world and see these massive piles of black coal. So I'm studying those, and in the work out front, you'll see a little bit more of an elaboration. But I'm really just beginning this process. You know, these are simple forms. I felt like, okay, let me try to mimic some of these forms. I think I can do that. And it's hard and dirty. I had to find a whole new place to work. I could not do this at my house or on my deck even, because all this black bardo was falling down onto my below neighbor. It's just impossible. So I found a place to work where I can get nice and dirty. But and I'll show that workbench. But I wanted to sort of bring the talk full circle because this is the Latimer pit that Andy Myers took me to recently. The last time I went up into the region to get another supply of coal, I wanted some bigger lumps to begin playing with and carving. And let me just say, Blashak Coal, we've got Boyd Creslow here in the audience, and I just want to give him my major thanks for donating materials to my project, and also being so patient and welcoming to someone who, from away. But you've made me feel quite welcome, and I'm very excited to have a partner in the region. And I just love knowing where my stones come from, right? It's not farm to table dining, it's mine to museum artwork. So yeah, this is the last slide of me with some of my PPE on, and I just have so much more to learn. I'm super excited about continuing. If anyone here knows of or is an anthracite stone carving, I'd love to talk to you too, because I don't know anything about the traditional tools and techniques, but
Is that piece of coal in the middle going to become a carving of a trilobite?
it could, and that's a great idea. I love that idea, actually. No, that's the beginning of another series of comb piles that have been eroded or shoveled out a little bit.
Would you wear the K95 without COVID?
I wear that only when I'm carving right now.
It's not COVID related.
No, this is anti-black lung protection, which is serious business. And I also want to make sure I'm doing that right. And I already sustained a slight injury to my thumb tendon from intense amount of carving this fall. But also, I'm also interested in continuing my project and continuing my historical research. So I know up here in this region there are many historical societies and museums that must have a lot of things that I would be interested in looking at up close. So if you are connected to one of those spaces or know of a collection like that, along with an exhibition space that could host further iterations of Sea and Coal, I would be extremely grateful. But so anyway, let me leave that here. Oh yeah, also the works on display are for sale. It would be awesome if a local collection would acquire one of my pieces and I could be represented in the region alongside the traditional carvers. That would be an honor. I've brought some books for you to look at, a couple pieces of coal. That's a model of the Huber breaker that someone 3D printed for me for my Sea and Coal exhibition. So you can look at that. And I have a series of stenciled prints there those are also for sale. If you're interested in any of those, it's a series of breakers. Feel free to look through them. I'll just hold them up. These were in the Sea and Coal exhibition at the Library Company. I've got about 10 of them. So I just brought those up as well. And I knew this would be an audience that might be interested in seeing the silhouettes of some of these historic breakers that I'm sure are disappeared now from the landscape. I think they're mostly all gone. So thank you. Let me answer your questions or hear your comments or your stories. Please.
How many buckets of coal did you wind up not being able to use? I mean, when you were first starting to carve, I mean, it must have been a real learning experience, a very powdery and crumbly type of experience.
Yes and no. It was super high quality coal.
So
It was glassy. But that was when I started to be able to determine that there are different qualities. Some of them have veins going through them of this crumbly, punky stuff, which is super easy to carve, but you know, it's kind of a dead end. It's not this solid block of coal unpolluted with anything else. So that whole thing was a waste. I do have buckets of shards and grits that I kind of want to bring back up into the coal. I'll bring it back up to the Latimer. We won't just bring it back to the place where it belongs. Please.
What do you decide to make out cool? How do you choose your designs?
Yeah, I love the idea about carving the shape of a fossil into a material that is sort of a fossil itself. But I at first I didn't really know. I can only do what I can do with my tools. And so I think the default was, I'm gonna start carving very simple forms.
Here's a way I recommend you get inspiration from. If you would sell in New York City, if you would make carvings of the buildings, that'd be probably an easy way to earn money.
And it's a great metaphor for the fact that coal built the urban environment. It did. And so then you're that's just another beautiful idea. You've got a very creative mind. Please.
Have you ever tried to pull a print from one of your cards?
No, I haven't. I've been making my own water-based inks using anthracite powders that I generate from the polishing, so it's quite fine. And the stencils are made from anthracite grit ink, but it's ink. It's mixed with a thick acrylic medium, but it's thick as ink. I roll it out with a brayer, and I do most of my printmaking now with this black ink that I make. I don't know how this acrylic film would adhere to the anthracite, but it would be worth experimenting with. In terms of carving, and I'm very interested and involved with language, I would love to have the skill to carve words and letters into the coal. And I mean, I've seen beautiful pieces. I mean, I know that it's possible. It just takes the right tools and some training. I'm willing to learn. If anyone knows how to stone carve letter forms, I'm all over that. So I could see that as a possible direction.
I'd be very curious to see the result.
Yeah, I'd be.
One slide you had where you had 3 or so smaller pieces.
Yeah.
Almost like,
It is pretty flat.
it looks like a pretty.
It's true. I could actually just ink up a little test pretty quickly.
At that Design Heritage Museum, I purchased a model caboose that's made out of coal. And I got to purchase a model of a train made of coal in Korea. And I also got to purchase a model coal truck that's made out of coal, truck made out of coal.
That's wonderful.
I purchased a model eagle in Bermuda, Kentucky that's made out of coal, and got a cat that's made out of coal.
Oh,
At that Design Heritage
you have a
Museum.
collection.
Yes, it's part how you base your designs off of relate to coal history.
Potentially. Yeah. But probably in a more, potentially.
You know the state that has the most coal now is Wyoming?
Is it?
Yes.
Did not know.
West Virginia is now second, when the Bighorn Mountains, Wyoming, have nicknamed the Rockies West Virginia.
Hey, go ahead, Boyd.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for taking an interest in our industry. It's wonderful to see the industry depicted in such a way and connecting the past, which is so important, as you mentioned. It was really an industry that supported the industrial revolution
Right.
and two world wars, and also showing how it's done today. That past, your exhibit out here actually looks like, I don't know, you mentioned specifically, but it looks like our current mines today. The benches that exist to get down to access to coal, the deepest parts.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I think it's pretty neat, and not just, and of course the piles. It looks like the coal that's the anthracite that exists today. So
Yeah.
I think it's wonderful. There's
Thanks.
a lot of passionate people that still work in the industry, and
Yeah.
it's good to see it being preserved and connected.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad that you appreciate that. I felt, you have an openness to seeing coal in other ways, which I know also you're helping to further research into the material at universities. So I think that's just fabulous work.
Yeah, and that's another good point. That anthracite is not the coal that's the war against coal.
Yeah.
It's all, but all the coals were really the start of so many chemical, DuPont back when it almost
Yes.
all the products that
Yes.
DuPont created back then started with coal.
Yeah.
And today now there's a huge push for many reasons to discover rare earth elements and graphene and
Yeah.
there's a lot of work we work with Lehigh University, several projects, University of Kentucky.
That's super
So
exciting.
there's a bunch of work going on in those places to help expand and come up with the next technological uses of.
Exactly, and it seems like there's many uses, so it's just a matter of scale, right? Shifting from one thing to another. Please.
Well, people now plan to use coal to make buildings because I want to see buildings made out of coal because it can benefit the coal industry and it can benefit Pennsylvania's economy.
Absolutely, and think how they would be already black. Like you wouldn't have to worry about them getting dirty and cleaning them every 20 years. I can see it. I can see it. I think that's beautiful. We also have a little reception set up in back, and anybody else? No stone carvers here, please. No, I haven't. But do you know that to be a fact? I mean, this is interesting because they're all different qualities. Wow. I think I've hit on the hardest, densest, most difficult material version.
Have you only used the mammoth?
Only.
Yeah.
I think that's the mammoth vein.
Yeah. So a lot of the other coals are more laminated.
Yes.
And grindability is good.
Earlier on, I had gotten a piece from you that was quite sizable that had those layers in it, and I called it sort of punky, soft stuff between these very glassy and hard layers, and I thought, wow, this is exciting. I want more of this because it's so easy to carve. But then I was like, okay, just get over it. Just do the solid. Because if I wanted to create like a really self-standing thing, it would need to be the best, purest coal available, which seems to be what I'm getting. I think I just got to the top.
But yeah, mammoth, I mean, the mammoth seam, the coal changes drastically within one mine site.
That's so
but then
interesting.
broadly across 6 counties.
Wow.
But the mammoth seam in the eastern Middlefield is world known.
Yes.
Sought after.
Absolutely.
Several industries.
Yeah.
They want that coal.
And I just think, again, this material is so rare, and the form that we have here in Pennsylvania is so high quality. It's something to be really proud of, and it's something to not forget about. I mean, who live up here closer to the anthracite fields, maybe there's no risk of it ever being forgotten, but just being away from this area in Philadelphia and life sort of swirling, we don't think about coal. We really don't. It's just not on the radar. And so that's part of my project, is to help people think about it, because it is such an influential material, continues to be, and will continue to be. So we need to all be thinking about it. Please.
2 questions. I have 2 questions. The first is, do you know the character Phoebe Snow from Scranton?
No.
Phoebe Snow was the fiction character that Steve Scranton used to advertise his coal.
Really?
Yes.
Phoebe Snow?
Yes.
Okay, that's cool.
And I recommend you post up on your phone, carb fix.
Carb fix.
They capture carbon out of the air. They capture carbon gas out of the air and turn it into a rock.
Yes, I've heard of this.
Yes, I saw it Down to Earth with Zac Efron. Did you see it Down to Earth with Zac Efron?
No, probably not, but I know of it. Okay, this is a great project, and this is creative thinking.
This could, if you would go to Carfix, you could ask them, you could put in an order and ask to purchase some of the carbon.
Yes.
And you get pure carbon for your work.
Yes, yes. In fact, I've seen this. Yeah, they're collecting carbon black from soot. I think, I don't know. Somehow they're turning gas into, they're collecting the carbon out of the air. So it's pretty amazing. Technology keeps changing. All right. Well, thanks again, everybody. Really appreciate your attention.